Hello, EDCI 708, the Charlotte cohort. Dr. Palermo with your week 6 instructional video. Thank you for our time together last weekend. I enjoyed learning along with you, and in particular, a big shout out and thank you to Kelsey Gibson, who helped us move through that rubric activity. And here is the final rubric that Kelsey recently shared with me. Now, when I say the final rubric, the rubric that we'll use for text facilitation in our March meeting, you have a chapter to read. We want to give each other and I want to give you some feedback on that presentation, and the rubric is the way to do that. Is it perfect? I don't think so. I don't believe, I think there's always room for continuous improvement in a project and a rubric like this. And I hope that you're always examining the rubrics that you use in class and think about how they can be improved. It is better than it was because I think there were definite categories or criteria in my rubric that don't belong. Every text facilitation is a little bit different. And you haven't read, all of you haven't read and prepared your presentations yet. So I'm not sure how you know just exactly how it's going to be evaluated with this rubric. But again, it was a helpful exercise, I think, when we think about the criteria and the performance standards for the work that we want to do, the teaching and learning work that we want our students to do in particular. Rubrics are a great way to provide formative and summative feedback, but they're not perfect, and we can improve on that. So my plan right now is to use this rubric when you do your presentations next time. I think we should incorporate some self-assessment and peer assessment, as well as my assessment of your presentations. And how I'll put all that together, I'm not sure. But I think we should also perhaps debrief following the presentations and say how did this assessment work? How did this rubric work to evaluate and provide feedback to the presenter? So we'll debrief it. It's not done yet. And thank you, Kelsey, for giving us a draft that we can work with, but it's not done yet. And there's the rubric as it stands right now. Here's your APA tip. This was passed along to me by Dr. Putnam, and I believe that it has been vetted by Dr. Natalie Gibson in the Media Center too. So you know that in many of your evidences, and probably in your dissertation as well, you might be citing standards. Well, here is going to be the standard Gardner-Webb way to cite standards. Either standards as a whole, like the Learning Forward Standards for Professional Learning, a specific standard within that set of standards, like leadership, right here, or the TLMS standards. This is going to be the way that the Gardner-Webb School of Education wants you to cite standards in the new APA 7th edition. And then the in-text citation will look like this. So there's your APA tip for the week. Cut and paste that and save it somewhere where you can use it later. And you do have some additional readings to do this week. You should be reading on and Earl and finishing that book prior to March. Standards for testing, chapter 4. This is where I really want you to focus, and I have an activity here for you for the discussion board that I hope will be a helpful one. Standards for test design and development, and they want you to reflect on 5 of 25 standards that are cited. I think I froze. Here, I would suggest that you use a standardized test of some sort. In North Carolina, at schools where I've worked, I'm able to get my hands on a testing manual for an EOG or EOC. Perhaps there are benchmark tests in your district that you can use as well. Perhaps your district or your school have purchased benchmark tests. Find a standardized assessment, a test that has a manual with it, and I think you should be able to answer these questions pretty quickly about the test developers and their different versions, about whether there's training for the people administering the test about whether there's help interpreting test results. So create a little table, and you don't have to do an in-depth analysis of a test, but you need to find one. So it's a little bit of a scavenger hunt again. Find a standardized assessment, especially one that has a test manual with it that explains to administrators or test users how to use it, and then assess your instrument. And that's what this discussion board says. Select a test, select 5 of the 25 standards. Again, in chapter 4, there are 25 substandards of those 5 clusters. Pick one from each cluster and tell us whether it meets or exceeds the standard. So assess a test and load that up there. You do have a discussion board on formative assessment, but I've closed the other discussion board that you can see here, but not in your work, about the standards. So read Tepper and Flynn, chapter 6. Do read Earl, and I guess you're supposed to have Hattie and Clark read by the 3rd meeting. Here's a short little article about formative assessment that, again, you may want to read prior to responding to the prompt about formative feedback and assessment. Readings, 2 discussion boards, work on your CDP and your PLCPB, and thank you for your feedback on that evidence work on the weekend. Write to me if you have any questions. Call if you have a burning issue for today. Text me, and have a great week. Again, it was productive time together in Charlotte. Please build on that. Do your reading and your writing, and then contact me if there's something that I can do to facilitate your learning. And one last shout out to Kelsey. Thanks for your help on that rubric. Have a great week.